Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 53. I am your host, Barney Smith of storycomic.com. With us is internationally celebrated and award-winning author, Amy Lawrence from Australia. Amy, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good, and you're talking to us from the future. It is Wednesday where you are now, so
I'm here to report that Wednesday so far is a fine, sunny, and pleasant day. So,
and before we got on, we talked a few months back with your cohort. I don't know, your colleague, your peer, your Leanna Brooks. Who was
my brain. Let's just call it what it is. Yeah.
And it was, and it's obviously we had to make sure that we I reached out to you to try to get you on as well, and was very excited to have you here. And you got a lot of stuff going on. I'm a big fan. But for the last several weeks, I've been subscribing and watching and following you on all this stuff there, and I'm amazed too is that you almost daily have a blog post that you put out as well.
Trying. Yeah. It's taken me a few years to get to the point where I can do that consistently, but yeah, we're on a bit of a roll at the moment. So
I was going to say, in one of your things that amylawrence.com, you mentioned here was my list I want to do in 2020, and surprised yourself about still. It wasn't exactly everything you wanted, but you still got a lot done in 2020 as well. So, we got a lot to talk about. I'm sure this hour is gonna go by fast. So, before we jump into talking about your work and your writing and some tips that you would give to potential writers and seasoned writers as well, do you want to first kind of give people a little bit of a background on how you got into writing and creating your own publishing company as well? Yeah.
So I don't know, writing is not ever really a thing that I identified as a young person going, yes, writing, that is me. I will do that thing. And it wasn't until, it was in year 10 really when a friend of mine who was really into writing, she was my best friend. We did a lot of stuff together. We hung out together all the time. We invented random languages together, as you do when you're bored at 2 a.m. at a friend's sleepover. And I don't know, we really enjoyed the process of world building together. And so we had designed this series that was at least a trilogy, and honestly, knowing us, probably like a 20-book series. And just really, really loved the process of putting the world together, collaboratively. And because we were both perfectionist procrastinators, there was a whole lot of world building and not a whole lot of writing that actually went on. But I don't know, I realized that I really enjoyed it. And so when I was in year 11 and 12, the year 11 and 12 system for my state, for my state's education is very flexible and fluid. There's a lot of student choice involved. And so I was actually able to choose to do a couple of creative writing units during my year 11 and 12 studies. And so I did that and I really enjoyed it. And it kind of snowballed from there, I guess. I went to uni not expecting to do anything English related. I wasn't actually studying English at all. I was studying law and linguistics when I first went to university. But it took, after a couple of years, I realized that I didn't really want to work in that field. And it's like, well, actually, what I want to do is write. So how can I actually engineer my life to make that happen? And as my mother pointed out, much to my annoyance at the time, but fairly enough, writing is not the kind of career where you can just step out of university into a writing career necessarily and hope to be making a decent salaried income. So what was I going to do to pay the bills in the meantime? So I switched over and did an English major and became an English teacher, which thankfully I've really enjoyed doing as well. So I feel like I kind of fell into the writing thing semi-accidentally, but at the same time, my husband and I have just been cleaning out our garage last week and going through boxes and boxes of old keepsake memorabilia. Yeah, like I said, I didn't realize it wasn't normal to just be pulled out of classes to go and do story writing in the little tiny storeroom classroom until I became a teacher. I was like, oh, I must have actually been good at English then, because that's what, I didn't realize that wasn't normal. But the teacher was I have such fond memories of her, and she was really, really I guess she really nurtured that story writing talent that she obviously saw in me there, and that potential. Because I found all these little spiral bound A4, dot matrix style printed stories that she had printed out, like that I'd typed up, and she'd printed them out, and then I'd illustrated them in the manner of all, 7-year-olds everywhere. And yeah, so I have like this little stash of the original Amy Lawrence stories. So yeah, it was never really a deliberate thing until I realized that I didn't want to go into law, and I was about 20 at that time, I think. But by the same token, if you look back, the signs were all there. Clearly Amy was going to write stories,
And so what was the first one? What was your first story? It wasn't the Sanctuary series. There was something. What was the first ones that you started putting out? And
oh yeah, no, the first ones that I actually published, the first long ones were the Sanctuary series.
Oh, was it? Okay. All right.
I did have a couple of short stories out earlier than that. I ended up pulling down, so if we want to talk about like phases of my career, which it still feels a little weird to be saying that I have a writing career, but hey, I have a writing career, so that's a thing. We can talk about the phases. So what really kicked it off for me was in about 2006, I joined this amazing website called Critique Circle. It's just literally critiquecircle.com. And it's a fantastic place where you can put your work up. It's password protected, so putting things up on that website does not count as publishing them, so there's no rights issues there. But you can post your stories to the different genre queues, and everybody else who's on the website can jump in and read that and give you feedback on your story and critique your story for you. And if you really want to get into it, which I did, you can get a paid membership as well, so you can create your own private queues and you can invite people to your private queues. And this is actually also the origin story of how I met Liana, because she joined about 6 to 12 months after I did, and I saw her making her way through the public queues, and she was so prolific and generous in offering feedback to people and in critiquing other people's stories, and she was so engaged. And at that time, I had a private queue, and I had a few people there reading my work, and they were lovely and gave really good feedback. But life is busy, and they weren't always able to give feedback in as timely a fashion as I would have preferred. So I saw Liana making her way through the queues there, and I'm like, yes, this is a person that I would like in my queues. Thank you. So I literally headhunted her. I started hanging out on forums where she was and like talking to her and everything. And yeah, invited her to join my queue. She joined my queue. She critiqued my stuff. And now here we are, literally best friends. She's the other half of my brain. I am the legal guardian of her children. It's a thing. So there was that sort of phase of like lots of practice and development. And during that phase, we had a fantastic group of us who decided to learn how to write short stories. And we had a short story queue where we had to try and post a short story a week, even if it was terrible and a first draft. Well, we just wanted to have the excuse to practice, basically. And so some of those short stories, then once self-publishing became a thing with the advent of the Kindle. Mm-hmm. So that was around 2010, I think, from memory. Right. So early 2010s, I started playing around with that, going, okay, well, this actually might be something that I can do. You'll notice if you've spent any time on my social media or on my website, I have a little bit of a problem with like having too many hobbies and just like wanting to do everything all the time, forever. So I saw this self-publishing thing and I was like, hey, this is a thing I can do. I could do this. So that's when that was like phase 2, I guess, where I started practicing going through the motions of self-publishing and what it would actually look like to do that. So I had a couple of short stories up then. I ended up pulling those down, although a lot of them in a slightly more edited form have now made it into the Inklet series.
Okay.
So a lot of them are still available. It's just a re-release with a rebrand and a re-edit and things like that. And then the press really kicked off in 2017. That's when I released the first book in the Sanctuary series, Where Shadows Rise. And yeah, that was really the beginning of our actual official inkprint press, even though it had been running, loosely speaking, since 2012. But yeah, the real professional foundations of it were 2017 and onwards. So we're still fairly new, but it was at that point that I felt that I was in a position to be publishing publishable quality fiction in my career, because I had written enough words. You know, they say that 1 million words is approximately your goal that you're aiming for, and I had got to that point. And also I had really committed to the decision of being my own publisher. As a high school English teacher, I work full time. I have 2 small children. We know that now. And I just looked at Leah. So at that point, Liana had a trilogy with HarperCollins. That was her Time and Shadows series, which is actually coming out. It's going to Inkprint Press is re-releasing that this year, which is pretty exciting. And I looked at the deadlines that she had to work around and things like that. And I was just like, I can't. I actually physically cannot add another layer of other people's deadlines onto my already jam-packed schedule in my life. I actually can't do that. So I decided that I would rather commit to learning the business aspects of running my own press. And at least that way I would have the flexibility of, oh, look, school deadlines happened. I have urgent reports due, etc. Can't do anything this month. Never mind. We can just shuffle all the press's deadlines, you know?
So if you have, some, authors or potential authors listening and looking at that. And so you bring up a good point of like the benefit of self-publishing in a way is that you can be in charge of your own schedule.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the drawbacks of self-publishing?
Like any writing career, you have to be prepared to put in a lot of effort before you start seeing the rewards. The general rule of thumb is that you need to have 20 major titles or 25 moderately major titles. So when I say that, I mean, you very kindly said before that Goodreads says I have 47 titles. And a lot of those are these little short story inklets. So I don't count those towards my title count number, right? I'm talking about things like, these ones which are more of a substantial standalone and full novels and short story collections and things like that. So for me, when I really dove into it in 2017, knowing that it was going to be a big time commitment on top of what I was already doing, if I wanted to do this properly, I gave myself 5 years and I said, okay, this level of work is a little frenetic on top of a full-time day job and 2 small kids. I have 5 years to make this work. And if I'm not seeing a distinct level of improvement within 5 years, then that's the point where I need to make another decision about, well, is this just going to be a hobby or am I going to keep running this as a business? And I'm really excited because running Kickstarters last year is actually for us now the tipping point at which we're now, I'm not having to personally fund the press anymore. So if you are going into it as a self-publisher and you're thinking about that as an author, for me, so that brings up the second thing. The 2 big things are, first of all, are you prepared to spend literal years working towards something, not knowing 100% for sure whether it's actually going to pay off and not getting necessarily a lot of feedback positively on that along the way? Like you're releasing to crickets. I'm happy being upfront and honest here. When I released this one here in March of last year, I didn't do any marketing for it. I didn't do any ads for it. I did nothing except put an announcement on my blog and on my socials saying, hey, by the way, this book is out. It sold 3 copies, So you have to be prepared for that mental slog as well of like pouring your heart and your soul into something, not knowing whether it's going to pay off for a good 3 to 5 years, maybe more. Right. And then another aspect of it is you have to be able to have the financial capital to make it work. And I'm really, really lucky. I know like Liana often does post. She just did a long thread on Twitter recently about the expenses of self-publishing because as an editor, she works as a developmental editor. And she works with a lot of authors who are wanting to self-publish and who don't necessarily realize the costs behind it. Now, I am extremely lucky in that, Liana is an excellent developmental editor and I am a line editor. And so the 2 of us have complementary skills. So neither of us have to pay for editing for our work because she will do the developmental edits and I'll do the line edits. Other things like covers, getting covers done, for me, it was a choice to really invest in improving my photoshopping skills so that I would be able to do our covers. I had professional covers done for these books for the Sanctuary series, right? That first one, absolutely gorgeous. And it cost me about $200 and that's a cheap cover. You know, that's a cheap cover. These ones, I had a friend who is a professional graphic designer, and she was able to match the design. And so those ones were only $100 because she gave me friends rates, but it's still an expense, you know? So you've got to be willing to either have the money there or the mindset that will say, yeah, okay, I'm going to go and take a course in Photoshop and I'm going to learn how to do this properly. And to be able to look at, you know, setting up things like our Inklets here, you can see are very clearly modeled on a template. And so literally all I have to do is grab a stock photo and drag and drop that into the template, and the covers for those are done. So being a bit smart with your cover designs as well there, you know. So yeah, I love self-publishing. I would not personally have it any other way. I really enjoy the business side of things. I enjoy, oh my gosh, spreadsheets, love of my life. And I like the control that I have over that. I like that I can see what's going on at all times, and I know what's happening and mostly why it's happening. But by the same token, you know, I'm in a very fortunate position in that it does cost me a lot less to self-publish than someone who doesn't have those kind of contacts. It might cost what it might cost them. And even so, I knew that I would have to commit to, say, maybe 5 years worth of funding the press out of my own salary before the press was able to start generating enough income for itself that it could actually be self-sustaining. So, yeah.
And so what do you, so now that it's, as you're talking about making this a self-sustaining piece of it, as a business now, because not only are you running a press, but you're also writing, how many projects at once are you, you know, works in progress that I do have? Because looking at your blog, I mean, like it's amazing where like you are, and you kind of said it in your blog. It's like, you know, I didn't think I did anything this past year, but wow, look at all the things I did. Like, how do you juggle your day like that?
Poorly is the answer. And also part of the answer to that, again, continuing on our theme of honesty here, I am looking into it for both work and personal reasons. I'm reasonably certain that I actually have ADHD. And so this idea of like multiple things going on, I can't focus on one thing at once. I actually can't. Oh my gosh, I had to do so as a teacher, I have to be first aid trained. And every year we have to do our CPR refresher. And I had to do, because of COVID, they make us do most of it this year by online course modules. And then we just have to go in and do a one-on-one where we quickly demonstrate that we actually can do it and things like that. And the online course module, not only did they not have an option to play the videos at double speed, I watch everything on double speed. Nuts, but I watch everything on double speed. Not only did they not have that option, this was approximately normal speed. I nearly died. I actually nearly died. So part of it is the fact that my brain actually just works really fast, and I need to have a certain level of background stimulation going on there to actually feel okay. And part of it is the fact that I'm poorly is how I juggle these things. There's a post somewhere back on my blog from a couple of years ago where I talked about the fact that, you know, if you're capable of juggling 5 balls comfortably, you can juggle 8 balls at a stretch. Maybe you can juggle 10 balls with a gun to your head, and your life requires you to juggle 11. Then you probably shouldn't be surprised when they come smashing to the floor on a reasonably regular basis, you know? So honestly, at this point, I just have time built into my schedule where I know that at some point in each quarter of the year, maybe I'm just going to have a week where all the balls smash on the floor and I just drop all the balls and nothing happens, you know? And part of it is just learning to actually accept that as part of the process and go, you know what? Yeah, it is okay to have a 0 week occasionally where all these balls fall down and you're incompetent at everything, including parenting and housework and teaching and writing and publishing and everything. But that's okay, you know? Somehow, magically, all these projects always seem to get done. Not necessarily in my preferred timeline, but they do always get done. And I just remember this piece of advice that I heard a colleague give someone at school a couple of years ago. There was this wonderful woman. She is honestly the most authentically optimistic person I have met in the world. She is amazing. And she had come to teaching in her mid-30s and delightful, optimistic, and really wanted to do her best with absolutely everything. And, if there's any teachers out there, rule number one of teaching is you can't do everything to your best because the job just doesn't let you, right? And one of our other colleagues turned to her one day and said, you just need to keep doing everything you're doing, but without the panic. And that has just really stuck with me, like I just need to keep doing everything I'm doing, but without the panic. Sometimes it will happen on time, sometimes it won't. And that's okay because, again, somehow magically it all gets done.
Right.
Yeah. But in terms of like numbers of projects that I'm juggling, let's see, in my head. So at the moment with writing, technically I'm working on, I'm working on, I haven't written anything for about 2 weeks because I'm dealing with ridiculous insomnia right now. So again, this is just one of those, yep, this is a drop the ball week. We're doing nothing this week. That's okay. We'll catch up later. But I'm working on a novella that is hopefully going to be my April release. I'm prepping for the sequel to the Fox book that will come out hopefully later this year. I'm working on a young adult, middle grade sci-fi novel that I promised my year 8 class 2 years ago that I would write. And oh my gosh, you have not faced problems in writing until you tried to write a book that you have promised to a group of 13-year-olds involving 25 main characters. What was I thinking? So those, and then there's another series that's burning away in the back of my head that like just appeared at Christmas time and has like attacked my brain going, yes, I am the thing you should work on. I'm like, I would love to, but also cue, So I think there's probably like 4 semi-active writing-y things going on in my head. On top of that, prepping for the next Kickstarter, prepping for my husband's Kickstarter where he's launching his next set of pins and matching socks. Working on covers for Liana Brooks' Time and Shadows series because Inkprint Press has acquired the rights to those and we're relaunching them hopefully starting in April, May, June. We're hoping to release those. Prepping for a Kickstarter to accompany that, to do the fan kit boxes for that. Working on semester 2 Inklets. I have all of the semester 1. One's now done and up everywhere, so that's great. But yeah, now working on doing the formatting and things like that for the semester 2 Inklets. That's all the current publishing jobs. Then there's all like the back publishing jobs where it's like, oh, look, we published this book 4 years ago and didn't really know what we were doing then. And now we know better. And we should probably reformat this book and make it actually look like a professional quality formatted book. I have a massive long list of things that need to happen with those titles as well. Working with a wonderful friend, Rachel Amphlet, who's a best-selling author who currently lives over in the UK. She writes crime thrillers. If you like crime thrillers, I definitely recommend checking her out, Rachel Amphlet. Working with her to try and get all of our Inkprint Press titles into libraries in Australia and the US. That's like her area of specialty with self-publishing. So that's another thing that's happening. And then the school year is about to start. As a teacher, I go back on Monday and then the students start Tuesday, the first Tuesday in February. So should probably actually do something about planning for my classes, I guess. You're supposed to like teach stuff to students. We should probably plan for that maybe, since that's in 2 weeks' time. Also, my son's birthday's coming up and we have a birthday party that I have to plan. So yeah.
You got all things. So you mentioned earlier, and we talked about before we went on, went live, is your Inklets, which is actually really kind of an interesting thing. Is it a subscription based thing, or is this something people can just get copies of, or how does that work? And tell us, where'd you get this idea of these Inklets?
I realized, I'm like, where have all my Inklets gone? And I realized they've actually all just gone down next to me because every time I take off a chunk to show you, I'm not putting them back. Anyway, Inklets. Oh, here they are. So if you don't know what the Inklets are a non-connected series of short stories. So kind of like you would get, I guess, as a magazine or something like that, where everyone is a standalone, but we have them numbered that way. So that they're kind of, they look cute and collectible and all that sort of thing. The idea for it came, I had a couple of standalone short stories up in around about 2012 anyway, when I was practicing with the idea of self-publishing. But mostly it came from a couple of courses that I was doing with Dean Wesley Smith. He and his wife, Christine Catherine Rush, who are both independently best-selling authors, they run WMG Publishing, which has some really great online lectures and courses that I've been picking away at over the last couple of years. And in one of those, they've got some really good courses on business and on making a living as a self-published author and things like that. And in one of those, he mentioned that he was thinking about doing something like that with his short stories. And I was like, that's the thing we can do, because Liana and I, I think it was for 2 years in 2017 and 2018, maybe, or 16, 17, somewhere around that era. Again, wanting to brush up on our short story skills again. I mean, I say that. We said before we went live as well, you mentioned that Liana, when she was on the show a couple of months ago, was frequently like, oh, yes, and here's a project that Amy made me do. And so the Inklets are kind of another one of those projects, right? One of my absolute favorite authors ever, Maggie Steve Otter, she and two of her writing buddies had run a short story blog for a couple of years, and they had collected those stories into an anthology, and I had bought the anthology and I just loved it. It was amazing. And I was like, yes, short story blog. I don't have enough projects to juggle right now. We should do that too. This is me with, a 10-month-old baby about to start back at work full time. And I'm like, yes, another project is exactly what I need right now. We question it frequently. So yeah, for 2 years we ran a short story blog where the goal was to try and post a short story from one of us weekly. So that, and then doing this course with Dean and him mentioning that about publishing the short stories as standalones, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, we have all this intellectual property sitting around doing nothing. It's all just there. We might as well do it. And so we were like, okay, cool. Let's also, this is for the potential self-publishers out there. These are free advertising, okay? We honestly never expected to actually sell any of them. We actually didn't, okay? We're like, yes, it is a tiny story. Honestly, the shortest story is 4 pages long. This one here is, I don't know, let's see. Oh, this is 2 stories. So one of them 6 pages. And let's say the other one is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. So that's a bonus. You get like a whole 15 pages of story in this one. Steal. So we're like, look, no one is going to buy these, but they will be excellent for, look, I'm just going to say it, gaming the algorithms when it comes to the online bookstores, right? We're like, look, at least this way it looks to the algorithm like we have a lot more titles. And KDP in particular, so Amazon in particular, love it if you have a consistent release date. So the fact that these come out on the 1st and the 15th of every month regularly, Amazon really likes that with their algorithm. So that was the motivation behind it. We're like, look, we'll put together a year of them. We'll see how many stories we've got. We'll release them on the 1st and the 15th just to get them out as fast as we can, so that we've got bulk and we've got momentum there for the sales algorithms. And so we did that, and then we're like, a year. Yeah, actually we have 2 years worth of these. And we've kind of written a few more short stories this year. And look, we only really need a couple more stories, and then we've got 3 years. And then we really only need 4 more stories after that to make it to 100. And 100 is kind of a cool number. So let's aim for 100 short stories. And oh, whoops, we wrote more stories this year, and now we have enough for like 4 years worth of Inklets. And are we still going? What are we doing? So at the moment, the Inklets are scheduled all the way through to nearly the end of 2023.
Oh, wow.
And that turned out to be a bigger thing than I thought it was going to be. If Liana was here, she would be like dying of laughter right now, because, oh my gosh, Amy introduced a new project and it turned out to be bigger than we thought. That's never happened before, said nobody ever. And I guess also, shock of all shocks, people like them and people buy them, both in print and in ebook. So it's a thing, and now we're doing them. Yeah.
So let me ask you, is like, because just like you have your bigger series, so does Liana. Now your bigger series here, where do you write because I saw this too with your blogs. Do you use these blogs and these short stories as a warm up to when you're writing, or do you use them as a wind down? As, all right, I just did this, I'm just gonna kind of decompress with writing a short story. How does that work?
For me, for Liana, it's kind of a lightning strike. There'll be like a random confluence of events, and suddenly there's a short story in my inbox, and it happens very randomly and unpredictably. For me, so I was really sick in 2019, which if you go back and look through my blog posts and things, there's some information about there. Yeah. Basically, I discovered through some extensive testing with specialists that I am food intolerant. It was fun, largely caused by a probable celiac diagnosis, but again, that's still questionable. So I was really, really, really sick in 2019. About as sick as you can imagine without being hospitalized, and probably there was a point where I should have been hospitalized for my mental health. So coming out of that, particularly into last year, then finished the Fox book novel, and then was just like, you know what, I'm still in recovery mode. I don't think I can actually commit to doing another big novel now. And had also signed up to a couple of online courses that were about short story writing and that required you to write 3 short stories in a week, one of which you had the week leading up to write, and then the other 2 you had 24 hours to write these stories and get them in. So I did that in January and got 3 short stories that way. Went back and finished the Fox book and did all the pre-production for that, tried to launch into the sequel, tried to launch into something else, and none of it was sticking. And so when it got to April and Australia went into lockdown and I was working from home, we were really, really lucky in the ACT. We only had about a 6-week period of lockdown where we were all home. But I was like, okay, to keep me focused and to try and keep me writing through this, I'm going to do a challenge, which is something that Dean Wesley Smith does often. And I sort of took the idea from him. I'm like, I've got 20 days available to me of like school holiday days in the middle of this lockdown period. I'm going to try and write 10 stories in 20 days, just see if I can do it. And I didn't, but I wrote 6 stories in 14 days and then decided I never wanted to see the computer again for another month. But I was really happy with that. And you'll see those stories. They'll come out in 2022, April 2022 as a collection, which I have a sneaky of here because I was going to release them this year and then a few things happened, and I'll explain that when it releases, but this is what it will look like. Bye, pretty. So that's that challenge. And then I don't know, I really enjoyed that process, and it really taught me a lot about how fast it was actually possible for me to put good words on the page, because the editing for those short stories was really minimal. And I felt like it really leveled up my writing in a way that picking away at the same novel over a long period of time, like that still levels up your writing, and it's still really important, but I think it's different. Writing the short stories really enabled me to focus on practicing some specific techniques. And then in term 3, I committed the cardinal mistake again and made promises to children. I was like, okay, I can't get a novel to stick. I tried writing a few different ones and I just couldn't get them to stick. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to write short stories. I also watched this amazing lecture. Oh my gosh. So Mary Robinette Cowell, who is the president of the SFWA at the moment in America, so Sci-Fi Writers of America, she did the guest lecture. Brandon Sanderson, who if you're into fantasy at all, you will know, he writes the big fantasy books like this and was the one hired to finish off Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series and la la la. He is also a creative writing professor at BYU in Utah. And because of COVID, they decided to record his lectures and put them all up on YouTube for free. So you can actually search that and watch all of those for free. And so I did that. And one of the lectures is on short stories. And he self-professedly does not write short stories. His books are like this. I'm not exaggerating. So he got Mary Robinette to come in and do a guest lecture. And it was just a transformative moment. The way that she explained short story structure, and you can iterate it to be novel structure as well. A lot of writers, and I see this with, students that I work with at school as well, a lot of writers really struggle. It's like, I've written the first third of the book and I know what happens there. I know what the ending is and I know what happens there, but how do I bridge this gap between point A and point C? I really don't know what to do with the middle, right? her lecture was transformative, because I swear, even after writing and practicing and writing a large quantity of words over the last decade, that still felt muddy to me, and watching her lecture, which is freely available on YouTube, just search up Mary Robinette Cowell short story structure. And I think it should come up on YouTube there. And it really crystallized that understanding for me of actually how you get through the middle in a really meaningful way. And so I was like, look, I can't focus on novels at the moment. My brain's still in recovery mode. I want to practice short story structure anyway. I know that that's a weakness of mine. Liana's great at structure. And that's a real strength of hers, particularly being a developmental editor. And I'm really strong at the more sort of like chapter by chapter, nitty gritty sort of stuff, right? So I'm like, I know I want to practice structure overall. I'm just going to focus on writing short stories. And as you know, you've read my 2020 recap blog post. I was like, this feels like I'm doing nothing. I feel like I'm wasting time. And oh, look, oops, I accidentally wrote 16 short stories and now I have a book of them. But in doing that, I was like, okay, I'm stuck for names. Don't know what to name my characters. This is very stressful. I'm like, hello, year 10 class. Would it be okay if I just like ran through the class of you and borrowed all of your names for short stories? And of course they love that idea. And of course I only got through half the class. And so now I'm committed to writing another 13 stories this year using those particular names. So that was a very, very long way of saying I am finding that short stories are a really good palate cleanser between big projects. Yeah. I was like, sorry. Like people ask me a simple question and I give them my life history in response.
But talk to us a bit about the what do you think? Because you just mentioned the short story pieces. Is there any type of genre or prose that you seem to get more excited about, or you seem to your gravity is like your kind of your default setting?
Yeah, much to my mom's disgust, I always write fantasy. She doesn't have a problem with fantasy. It's just not her thing, and she doesn't read it. Sorry for the camera wobbling there. So she's like, when are you going to write a book that I will actually read and enjoy? I'm like, well, okay. On the one hand, you're not my target audience. On the other hand, I did actually write a story over Christmas that had no magic and no fantasy in it whatsoever, but it has so much swearing in it that I'm not going to send it to my mom to read anyway. So yeah, definitely like fantasy, and particularly contemporary fantasy and urban fantasy. So any kind of magic in a real world setting, that's my sweet spot,
Do you have, so when it comes to that, like when you mentioned at the beginning when you're working with your childhood friend creating these worlds, do you is your series, including the Sanctuary series and all this, is it a shared universe? No,
I made the decision to leave that universe alone, partly out of respect for my friend, because she has not gone on to really do much with her writing, although she picks away at it sometimes.
Yeah.
And partly also, Liana will be the first to tell you I have trouble letting go of ideas. Right? This is a weakness I have. If I've had the idea, then I'm now emotionally invested and I want to make this idea work and I want to fix it. But the thing that you learn, the more that you write, I think the more that you come to understand, like people tell you that ideas are disposable, but you don't really get it until you've done it for long enough, and they are disposable and you will always have more ideas that you love. And the problem with some of those really early ideas that I had, like that story with my friend, is that they are really reflective of who I was both as a person and as a writer at that time, which is not who I am as a person or as a writer now. And so when trying to work with some of those original ideas, you see things like structural problems and inadequate or clunky character motivation. And yeah, I could put the effort in to fix that and to make it work, but am I emotionally invested in that world still enough to do that work? Or would I rather just, my queue of books that I have that I'm really passionate about, that I really want to write and get out into the world, honestly, if I keep publishing at the rate that I'm publishing now, they will keep me going until I'm 50. And that's without allowing myself to add any new ideas to the mix, Right. And sorry, yep.
I was going to say, so how do you, when you're talking about the books that the books that you've published, part of with like either your Inklets and the other books, how many of them are, how much do you put into, and this is a, kind of like your writing 101. Do you create the world first, or do you have the story in your head, or do you have a protagonist that you want to write about first? How do you do that?
A to Z, as in everything, all the above. It really depends on the book. Some ideas come world first. Some ideas come character first. Some ideas come plot twist first, because I'm like, hey, that's a really cool plot twist. I want to play with that idea. How can I motivate that and make that work? Some of my stories are completely planned. Some of them are completely not. Particularly variable with short stories. A lot of my short stories, particularly the really short, like the flash fiction from It All Changes Now. That's the ones I did back in term 3. A lot of those were completely unplanned and very spontaneous. And I might get a few sentences in and be like, oh, hey, this matches that world that I already have. Cool. Okay, I'm now writing in that world. Great. Or it might be something completely new. And even with the novels, it really, really varies. Like, my Sanctuary series is down. Honestly, that bookshelf is going to end up on my lap by the time we're done. This one went through about 7 drafts.
Oh, wow.
This is my first draft.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Like literally I did not plan this at all. All I did for planning this one is I reread the first 2 books, and I wrote down a list of anytime I found something in the first 2 books that felt like it needed to be wrapped up, I'd just make a note of it. And then once I had a big list at the end, I color coded, and I'm like, right, green, vitally important. I have to wrap this up in order for the series to feel complete. Yellow, it would be really cool if I could wrap this up, and I probably should try. And then red, or maybe I did it the opposite way around. Red was urgent, and green was like, it would be cool if I could wrap this up, but honestly, it was a throwaway line, and no one's going to care if I don't, and that's it. Then I spread all those, I cut them up into little tiny pieces like this, spread them all out on the desk, had that next to me, and wrote. Wow. And that's it. And every time I was like, oh, hey, I've just checked off that thing. Cool. Throw that piece of paper in the bin. Oh, hey, I've just checked off that too. Throw that in the bin. And I did no planning for it apart from that whatsoever. And then sent the first draft to my proofreaders, and they caught typos, and here it is. And clearly it was not terrible because it won the award. So.
And I was going to ask you about that. I like the editing piece to that. After you write, do you like you said, you have beta readers who will, and how much of you have feedback through your beta readers or something where once you give them a draft of a book that you had to completely change it because they gave you some points to say this has to change, this character, no. How many times does that happen for you?
Not often, because I am stubborn. And if I'm really committed to how a book is, I just won't give it to beta readers, and I'll just be like, well, I don't really have beta readers per se. What I have is Liana, and she's like my editorial feedback person. Yeah. And I have 2 other people who something might go to if I know it's a problem spot and I want actual authorial input to, hey, you guys are professional authors as well. This bit is stuck. Liana suggested this. I've tried to fix it. We're not sure. What do you guys think? So there's 2 of them who are like my problem solving team for the occasions that I need that. And then other than that, it's literally just friends and English teacher friends who will proofread and spot typos and inconsistencies for me, and that's it. They don't give any feedback on the actual mechanics of the story. It's just, hey, you changed their eye color, or, but wait a second, you said it was morning back there, and hey, you've spelled these 3 words wrong. Wow. So they're literally just at the copy edit level. And it's generally the longer the work is, the more developments it goes through. The Inklet short stories, that'll just be like a quick flick to Liana and be like, hey, does this make sense? Yep, cool. Okay, I'm publishing it. Novels. So the most contentious one was this one here, which came out last year, my Fox book one.
Yeah.
And I had a friend read it. Oh, I also forgot. I have a very important reader in this process, my friend Claire, who is an avid reader and not a writer. And her job is literally just to make sure I finish the book. Right? I send her chapters as I write them, and she's very generous, and she's always effusive in her reply emails, being like, this was amazing, you must write me more. And I'm like, okay, I will write you more. So she loved it. in the second draft. I did the first draft years ago and then redrafted it the year that I was sick. She loved it. Another author friend loved it as well. Liana was like, you need to change this, 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 and this. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do half of what you said. Half of what you said, because the rest of it, I emotionally disagree. Possibly you are logically correct, but I don't care. And the other two writers liked it the way, the other two readers rather liked it the way it is. So I'm just, yeah, cool. You're a professional and I trust your opinion, and I'm still only taking half of it because.
And do you still use the critique circle at all, or are you still part of that, or no?
Kind of drifted away from that. It was really, I find that was really great for early stage, like early career writing. And then after that, I don't know, we had our group that we had on our private queues. And then everybody from there, like we sort of stopped using critique circle and started emailing each other stuff anyway. Some people went into other professions. Like one of the friends from that group is now a doctor. Some people went different directions with their writing. One of them is a published playwright. One of them's a really, really well-published award-winning short story author. Merk Wolfstar, I think I'm pretty sure that's their writing surname now, Merk Wolfstar. And I don't know, you just kind of, you find the people that you need at the time that you need them.
Right.
I thought, And
what would be some of the tips or advice you would give to a writer that you wished you knew like 5 years ago?
5 years ago.
Or 6.5 years ago.
Yeah, it's really just, it's the kind of advice that on the one hand you wish you could go back and tell yourself, but on the other hand, you'd never listen to it anyway, Right. And it's all just those things of just, be patient. Be patient. This takes a long time to get going. It does. And honestly, that's a good thing, because the writers who tend to be around the longest tend to be, not always, but tend to be the ones that have the slow build to begin with, because that establishes a really authentic, genuine fan base. Whereas if you shoot straight to the top of the charts as your first book, it's kind of all downhill from there, So this is going to take a long time, and that's okay. That's okay. Another really important thing that I heard from other writers who were, steps ahead of me in their career just a couple of years ago was the fact that actually you can't do anything to kill your career. You can't. Like, you actually can't kill your career as a writer unless you go out maybe and are a complete jerk on the internet and are a horrible person and people don't want to have anything to do with you because of that. But in terms of writing mistakes, like, yeah, cool, you can put out a bad book. That's great. No one will buy it. And you can not write anything for a year because you're sick and you need time off. And okay, people might forget about you a little bit. Okay. And next year you just do more promo and do what you did to get to that point in the first place. Like, there is not actually anything short of being a jerk that you can do that will kill your career. And on the flip side of that, as long as you are committed to continually learning and continually writing consistently at whatever that looks like for you, whether that's consistently once a month or whether that's consistently once a day, as long as you are committed to learning and writing, you actually can't fail at this either. It might take you 20, 30 years to get there, but the only way you fail is if you stop writing.
Right.
And also, that's a legitimate decision. If you get to a point where you're like, what, this just isn't fun anymore. Well, cool. No one's going to come and like beat your door down because you decided to stop writing. So I guess what this all boils down to is, and I think this is the same with anybody's passionate dream, yeah, following your dreams is great and really important, and fundamentally no one cares. No one cares. The people who love you care about you being happy. They're not invested in your dream. They're invested in you. And so if you're doing something that makes you happy, great, they're happy too, but they're not invested in your actual dream because it's your dream. It's not their dream, right? And your fans are invested in your work, but if you like suddenly drop off the face of the planet, cool, there's a million other books there. They're going to go buy those other books, right? Like, no one cares, and that's a good thing, because it means that, again, short of being a jerk on the internet, you actually can't do anything wrong. It's just, chill.
That's a good point. Yeah. So Amy, we're at the hour. So where can people find you? I mean, I know where you got a couple of sites and things. So
I love the fact that if you just Google Amy Lawrence, I am the first page of search results. So super easy to find. So yeah, www.amylawrence.com is my main hangout on the screen there. That's me. I also have Inkprint Press, obviously, which is www.inkprintpress.com. There it is on the screen again. Those are the two main places. I also hang out on Instagram mostly, though I'm taking a month off at the moment. Sporadically on Twitter. Pinterest is a great place, but obviously you can't really chat to me there. But like, if you ever want to see what the inside of my brain looks like, but if you do, Pinterest is the place to go. So yeah, all over socials, websites. These are the places to go. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm pretty easy to contact.
Yeah.
Come to
We'll get you back on one of these days because we never got to talk about your fan kits. We didn't talk about your how-to books. There's a lot of stuff that we need to chat more about. And also, you said you have a Kickstarter coming out sometime this year.
Yeah, we'll have a couple this year. One of them is for. Hang on, give me 2 seconds. Oh no, this is the one I don't have on my shelf. That's okay. The one coming up really soon is for Dreaming of Forests, which is a short little novelette. That came out a couple of years ago, so to give it a bit of a bump, and also then paired with my new release that is hopefully coming out in April, but that means I have to actually finish writing it, So I was hoping to release that Kickstarter on the 1st of February, but I think I'm actually just going to delay that by a couple of weeks to make sure that I'm a bit further into the book first. I'm only a quarter of the way through at the moment. I thought I was halfway through, and then I hit a twist, and I'm like, man, this is not the midpoint. This is like the end of Act 1 twist. Apparently I'm writing a 20,000 word story, not a 10,000 word story. Okay, fine. So yeah, but sometime in February we'll launch that Kickstarter for those two little novelettes, and there'll be the accompanying fan kit minis there. The big Kickstarter will be in March, which is for Liana's Time and Shadows series, the big relaunch and rebrand of those. Hopefully, my big release this year will be the sequel to Fox Book.
Okay.
Yeah, and that'll wrap that series up. That's just planned to be a duology. So yeah. But I have this problem. Basically, I sit there in January, I create these extensive plans, and then my brain goes, cool, we planned that, so now we should do something else.
Yeah, there was like some sort of psychology that like if you announce what you're going to do, you still get the same feeling of a success. What is that called? That chemical that's released in your brain.
Yeah, and like, is it endorphins that you get?
Endorphins, yeah, you get the same endorphins once you announce you're doing something than you would if you actually did it. So
it's a problem. Liana knows now. I'm like, Liana, why am I suddenly writing this book when I was planning to write the other one? This was me over Christmas, right? And she's like, sorry, do you know yourself? Like, this is what you do. Of course you're writing a book you didn't plan to write. This is how this works.
So come back on once you have your Kickstarters out. This had a great time. I had a great time, Amy. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And have a great Wednesday. What is it, close to afternoon now, right? So
it's just past midday here.
Wow, jeez. Okay. All right. Cool.
Future's looking good. Forgive the mess. This is where I am sitting right now. Okay, so I've got my cool looking bookshelf. This is my son's bedroom. I'm literally in my son's bedroom right now. I do not have a door that I can shut to keep people out when I am attempting to do work and things. I was trying to write an article last week for Aurealis. I'm so excited. I can now officially say that I am a regular columnist at the Aurealis magazine, which is very exciting. And literally, I would move upstairs to my study, which is on the landing at the top of the stairs. And 5 minutes later, the kids would follow me up. So I would go downstairs, and 5 minutes later, the kids would follow me down. I'm like, guys, I just need to finish this article, please.
I have well, this is the thing, because it's the daytime for you. At least it's nighttime for me. So I know my girls are supposed to be in bed. So
And it's school holidays, so they're just like everyone's home and they're bored, and
Yeah.
That's right.
So this is, I gotta say, Amy, this is great because I always like to have like an outro at the end of the podcast, and I'll have this part as like in there. So
It's perfect for you,